Some of the smartest people do not look impressive at first glance. They may speak less, withdraw more, question everything, replay tiny moments, and admit uncertainty faster than everyone else in the room. The contradiction is this: the sharper the mind, the less comfortable it often is with simple answers. Stay with this all the way through, because what looks unusual on the outside may be a hidden pattern of intelligence underneath. And once you trace that pattern, these daily habits stop looking random. We usually imagine intelligence as something obvious, someone who solves problems quickly, someone who remembers everything, someone articulate, sharp, effortlessly convincing, the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately seems ahead of it. But that is only one version of intelligence, and perhaps only its surface. In real life, a high-functioning mind can appear in quieter forms. It can look like a person who needs more distance than others, a person who cannot stop asking why, a person who lingers inside one small thought as though it were an entire landscape, a person who doesn't rush to speak, not because they have nothing to say, but because their mind is still examining what everyone else has already decided to move past. That is why intelligent people are often misunderstood. They can seem distant, overly complex, slow to decide, too inward, too analytical, too difficult to read. But sometimes those traits are not flaws at all. Sometimes they are simply the visible edges of a mind that does not know how to live only at the surface of things. One of the most common habits is spending a great deal of time alone, not because they dislike people, not because they are naturally hostile to social life, but because some minds think best when noise falls away. Not only literal noise, but social noise as well. Reactions, expectations, small talk, constant replies, the pressure to be available, responsive, and easy to read. Certain ideas do not grow in crowded spaces. They need quiet. They need a slower room, a closed door, an evening with fewer demands, a stretch of time where thought can fully unfold before it is interrupted. For people like this, solitude is not a rejection of life. It is often the place where their inner life becomes coherent again. Out of that quiet, another habit tends to emerge: relentless curiosity. They do not move through the world as if everything has already been explained. A brief comment, a strange silence, a habit in another person, a pattern in their own reactions, even the smallest detail can open a line of inquiry. Why did that remark linger? Why did that person smile without seeming relieved? Why do some people achieve everything they wanted and still feel hollow? Why do we become more defended as we grow older? Why is it so hard for human beings to say what they truly feel? Their curiosity is not always loud or academic. Often it is private, persistent, almost invisible. But it keeps pressing beneath appearances, searching for structure, motive, meaning, cause. Then there is a habit that often sounds odd until you recognize how common it really is: talking to themselves, not in a theatrical sense, but in a quietly functional one. A sentence under the breath, a thought spoken aloud, a private instruction: slow down, think again, one step at a time. That is not quite right. What am I missing? This is a form of self-guidance, a way of organizing attention, a way of regulating thought before it scatters, a way of catching impulses before they harden into action. People with strong cognitive control often use inner language, and sometimes outer language too, to shape how they focus, remember, and reason. It is not a sign of disorder. It can be a sign that the mind is actively working with itself. And perhaps because they spend so much time observing their own thinking, they are often more willing than others to say a sentence many people avoid: I do not know. On the surface, it sounds simple. In reality, it takes a certain kind of intellectual honesty. People with limited understanding often rush toward certainty because certainty feels powerful. But people who have looked more deeply into the complexity of things usually become more cautious. They know how much context can change a conclusion. They know how often first impressions collapse under better evidence. They know that knowledge is vast and their own grasp of it remains partial. So they do not treat not knowing as humiliation. They treat it as the proper beginning of insight. Still, intelligence does not arrive without cost. One of its more exhausting consequences is the tendency to think too much about things others consider small. A delayed reply, a slight shift in tone, a sentence that felt normal to everyone else but somehow remained suspended in the mind. While other people move on, their minds keep turning the moment over, testing meanings, replaying implications, comparing possibilities. From the outside, this may look like indecision. Internally, it is often a mind that refuses to settle too quickly for the first interpretation available. It wants to know what sits behind the obvious, and that means that even a small moment can become heavy when it contains more than one layer. There is another misconception worth noticing. We often associate intelligence with seriousness, as though a highly intelligent person should always appear restrained, formal, almost severe. But sharp minds frequently have a deep sense of humor, not because they are childish, but because humor depends on pattern recognition. It depends on sensing expectation, then feeling the precise moment it breaks. It depends on connecting ideas that were not meant to belong together. It depends on distance, timing, contradiction, and the ability to see the absurd shape hidden inside ordinary life. The people who understand complexity often see irony more quickly, too. They recognize how strange the world is beneath its official explanations, and sometimes laughter is simply the cleanest response to that recognition. Another strong habit is the willingness to change one's mind. For many people, beliefs become fused with identity. To revise a view feels like defeat, embarrassment, weakness. But more flexible thinkers tend to treat beliefs as provisional models, not sacred possessions. A model is useful only as long as it explains reality well. When better evidence appears, when a new experience reveals a blind spot, when a former certainty no longer holds under pressure, they are more prepared to adapt. That does not mean change is comfortable. Often it is unsettling, sometimes it is painful, but there is a quiet strength in preferring what is more true over what is more flattering. Then there is the habit that makes some of them seem slightly out of sync with the rest of the world, becoming more alert at night. Of course, not every intelligent person is nocturnal, but many describe a particular clarity after dark. During the day, the mind is interrupted by roles, duties, messages, demands, noise, motion. At night, much of that interference falls away. Thought stretches further, associations become clearer, questions that were drowned out in daylight return with sharper outlines. The night can feel less like a time of day and more like a cognitive atmosphere, a place where the mind finally hears itself properly. In social settings, these people often observe more than they speak. Again, this can be misunderstood as coldness or detachment, but in many cases, they are not absent at all. They are tracking the room more carefully than anyone realizes. Who is genuinely relaxed and who is performing ease? Who carries influence? Who is defensive? Which joke relieved tension and which one concealed it? Where the real emotional center of the conversation actually is. While others are reacting to what is said, they are also reading pauses, posture, eye contact, micro shifts in voice, the invisible movement beneath the spoken exchange, and because they register more, they often answer more carefully. Perhaps the deepest habit of all, though, is the persistent search for meaning, not just completion, achievement, efficiency, or recognition, but meaning. They want to know whether their work reflects anything real inside them, whether a relationship nourishes them or merely occupies them, whether success belongs to their own values or only to a script they have inherited, who they are beneath performance, what they are becoming through repetition, what a good life actually is once borrowed definitions fall away. This search can make them appear heavy, complicated, even restless, but often it is simply the natural consequence of seeing that a life can be functional and still feel untrue. At this point, something important needs to be said clearly. None of these habits on their own proves that someone has a high IQ. A person may enjoy solitude for countless reasons. They may overthink because of stress. They may stay up late because their routine is broken. Human behavior is never shaped by one variable alone. Personality, environment, upbringing, temperament, mental strain, timing, emotional history, all of it matters. What we are really describing here is not a diagnostic formula, but a pattern that often appears in minds inclined toward depth, complexity, and reflective processing. And that is why the most useful question is not whether these traits make someone special. The better question is whether they help us understand how a mind works. If you need more time alone, perhaps the answer is not to shame yourself for being unlike others, but to build your life in a way that allows thinking to breathe. If you analyze too much, the answer may not be to shut that ability down, but to give it structure, write things out, limit loops, turn raw analysis into usable clarity. If you speak to yourself, let that inner voice become a guide rather than a judge. If you are always searching for meaning, remember that not every question must be solved tonight. Some questions do their best work when they are carried gently instead of forced. Because at its deepest level, intelligence is not merely the ability to solve problems or store information. It is the capacity to remain in contact with complexity without fleeing into false simplicity. It is the ability to admit uncertainty without collapsing into passivity. It is the willingness to update beliefs when reality asks for it. It is the courage to keep looking, even when easy conclusions would be more comfortable. And perhaps most of all, it is the discipline of turning inward depth into something livable, rather than letting it become a private maze. That is why intelligent people do not always live more lightly. Very often they live more heavily. Their minds resist convenient endings. Their emotional lives may struggle with superficial bonds. They notice the gap between what is presented and what is meant, between what is achieved and what is felt, between the life being lived and the life that would actually feel true. But if they learn how to work with that depth rather than against it, it can become one of their most valuable qualities. Not a badge, not a performance, a way of being more awake, more honest, more humane. So if you recognize parts of yourself in this, do not rush to treat it as proof that you are exceptional. Treat it instead as an invitation to understand your own mind with more precision and more kindness. Intelligence may not begin with having the right answers. Sometimes it begins with staying long enough in the right questions. And if this reflection stayed with you, or as if it felt less like advice and more like a mirror held a little closer to the hidden parts of the mind, stay with Mind Psypher, not because it promises certainty, but because sometimes the most honest thing we can do is keep listening to the questions that refuse to leave us.